Hi guys, hope everyone's well and welcome back to the Improvement Podcast. Today I have a special guest, Charlie Everall. So, Charlie, would you like to introduce yourself to people who aren't aware of you?
All right. Thanks for having me on, firstly. It's great to be on. So, obviously, my name is Charlie. I haven't competed yet. I'm an online coach and not really a natural bodybuilder. Well, I haven't competed, so I don't know if you can call myself a natural bodybuilder, but I've been training for around 5 years. Yeah, around 5 years. Um, and yeah, just love bodybuilding really. To be honest, the plan is to compete in 2025, so I'm currently just working towards that. But yeah, that's pretty much me really. To be honest, like a wannabe natural bodybuilder, but the goal is to do obviously fairly well, but we'll see. I haven't competed yet, so yeah, that's pretty much me, mate. Nothing really exciting to be honest.
Yeah,
Just a
typical kind of
average gym
story, I
guy.
guess.
Yeah, typical, you know.
And no
Yeah,
problem for
exactly.
having you on. So, how exactly did you get
I
into the
appreciate it,
gym?
mate. So as I was like growing up, like I was always like a natural, like skinnier guy. So like growing up, I was always like very, very small. Like I'd get absolutely crushed in like rugby and things like that. Like I was very, very skinny. And then in sixth form, the sixth form that I went to, we had sort of like a gym like within the school there. And that's sort of where I sort of first sort of realised what sort of the gym was, etc. So started like going there like every so often, and then eventually joined like a gym. I think it was like the gym group or something like that. Basically just a commercial gym, and that's sort of where I sort of wanted to get into it really. Just because like I wanted to get a bit bigger. That's literally it. I was obviously really really skinny, wasn't really like built whatsoever to be honest. I was basically a paper bag. Um, but yeah, just wanted to get a lot bigger. And then like I met like a few people, like I became friends with like one of the PTs there. And then really like got into it. I didn't actually hire a PT, but he helped me out a lot. And then just sort of like progressed and progressed like through going to different gyms, etc. But yeah, the reason why I started was mainly just to get like, a lot bigger because I was very naturally very skinny. So yeah, I've been training about 5 years now.
Nice. So, it definitely helps kind of having someone when you're relatively new to training to kind of like brush ideas off and just to help you out. You kind of saved save yourself making a lot of mistakes that you could potentially make if you didn't really have someone there to guide you, I believe.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, don't get me wrong. The first few years of my training was absolutely terrible. Like even the stuff that he said, like looking back, was absolutely terrible. Like, don't know why I was listening. At the time, like it was more than anything anyone else was providing me, you know. So um, I was happy to like listen and try it because I knew no better at that point. But yeah,
Yeah.
looking back, it was terrible. Um, but yeah, the first wasn't the best. But to be fair. Um, he was actually the person that encouraged me to like document my journey like within Instagram and stuff. So if it wasn't for me and him, I probably wouldn't have posted anything on social media. Well, not for a long time anyway. So
Yeah.
if you scroll back all the way onto like Instagram, you can see some terrible videos at this commercial gym. But it is what it is, all part of the journey, I guess.
Yeah, well, let's hope he doesn't listen to this, considering his advice is terrible. But so you mentioned that you've done
Oh, no,
rug.
yeah.
So you mentioned rugby there. Was that a sport you done for a good while when you were growing up, or?
To be honest, I was more of like a football lad, to be honest, more than rugby. Like growing up, like when I was younger, it was always football, football, football. And then as I got a little bit older, then it sort of transitioned a little bit into rugby, like through sixth form, just like here and there. Um, it was always really football. And then I sort of played a little bit of rugby, then realised like actually I'm very weak, so I should probably like get a bit bigger, and that's sort of kind of what led me to the gym. But with I didn't really play rugby that much. It was just sort of like the introduction to it. I was like, actually no, this is not for me. Let me just go to the gym.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's somewhat similar to myself. Like I got involved in kind of the gym just to help my judo because I'd done judo for a good 10 years when I was younger. Do you think like having that experience doing like sport in the past kind of transfers over to your ability to kind of train hard from the get go?
Definitely think so. Like having some sort of like sporting ability. Like if you look at most people who have like an interest within sport, they normally are like fairly dedicated to that given sport regardless. So if you therefore then take an interest within the gym, chances are you're going to be pretty dedicated towards that and therefore going to stick at it like long term. So eventually it will have like a positive impact, like obviously within your fitness journey and like, within the gym itself, because you're so used to being dedicated to a singular sport or like, many sports, growing up. So yeah, I definitely think it does help at some point within your journey.
For sure. I think you can step kind of skip that initial step of just kind of learning what kind of hard work is, because a lot of people, like, they'll join the gym and obviously there's the skill requirement of training, getting used to kind of executing movements correctly, but also like if it's not backed up by kind of hard work, then you're going to progress at a lot slower rate. Like I've seen that with clients, like people who know how to train hard but just don't have like experience in the gym, they make like progress at quite a fast rate. Whereas if you need to kind of teach someone training intensity, then it can take a good while and can influence their progress in that regard.
Yeah, or not even just from like the intensity standpoint, but just from like the dedication of like actually going every single week. Like if you
Yeah,
have a sport, for example, chances are you're going to be going to training every single week. You're going to be going to matches, whatever. And that like dials in like that dedication from the start. So you see like people like I have clients as well that say like, oh yeah, I want to start like going to the gym, getting better, etc. And then after a few weeks, they just like fall off because not because like they don't want it, but like just because they haven't got that routine and like dedication to get started in the first place. And half the time, like people just need to keep going, if that makes sense. And like
yeah,
even if you don't love it at the start, like I probably didn't love it that much at the start. Like it wasn't I stepped foot in the gym and I fell in love with the dumbbells. It's just the consistency of going and going and going, and then actually all of a sudden I was like, actually, I really enjoy this. Like, if I didn't have that sort of like dedication and sort of that like routine from the start, then it probably would have never like got to where it is now.
definitely. I think it's like a lot of like delayed gratification training in the gym, because you don't get results after, maybe you see some progress in terms of maybe your performance, but it's kind of long term gratification, it's delayed gratification. So it is kind of a case of kind of sticking to it for a good while, and then you start to see kind of the rewards of your effort. So I definitely agree with you there. So how long have you been coached by AJ now?
It's just gone 3 years, I believe. So yeah, just gone 3 years with AJ.
Nice. And how important do you think AJ has been, or for those who don't know, sorry, I could have touched on that prior. AJ is AJ Morris. He coaches both myself and Charlie. And how kind of pivotal do you think being with AJ has been for your development, and how's it kind of helped you?
Massively, absolutely, like massively. Like I know for an absolute fact that if I didn't hire AJ, like back when I did, like there's no way I'd be in this position that I am in now, like online, because there was no way I was making that like, this amount of progress in this amount of time if I hadn't have had him in my corner. Because like before hiring him, like my knowledge wasn't the best. And like there was not so many things I was doing wrong, but just so many things that I could have leveled up on, and that's ultimately what's led me to making so much progress. Um, Especially with like nutrition and like pushing body weight up and like actually like sticking to like a long term bulk as well. So yeah, I think with like, if I didn't have him, like I wouldn't be in this position today. And probably similar to you, how long have you been working with AJ now? Quite a lot while as well, I believe.
I think I just filled in my 175th check-in, so round about the same time frame or similar.
Mad.
Yeah,
Oh, I think I'm on like 170, so we're actually not far off.
yeah.
But yeah, you probably like are similar to me, like leveled you up as well.
Yeah, like when I first kind of started with him, like I just thought, right, I need to get my finger out, because I looked up to him like so much, and it just kind of took me to kind of another level in terms of my consistency. And I just kind of like, because you're investing in a service, which is a big kind of valuable thing about getting a coach, is like you're paying, so you're like, right, I'm not gonna mess about here. I'm not gonna waste my time or my money or his time as well. So you kind of get your finger out in that regard, and like it's from the get go, like I just started kind of nailing everything, and it's not really changed since, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. Like, especially at the start, like obviously, like when I signed up, etc., I had like the long-term goal to compete, etc., as probably most of his clients do anyway. But like you said, like I'm paying like a substantial amount of money now every month, and I can't afford to just waste that. Like I need to put it to use, if that makes sense. So, like you said, like pull your finger out, like actually be consistent, um, and like 3 years later, for the both of us, we've both made a lot of progress. You know.
Yeah, you talk, and so you've been gaining for pretty much like what seems like the majority of the 3 years. Is that right? Like, how much diets have you had in between there?
Yeah, pretty much most of the 3 years, to be fair. So within like just over 3 years, I think we've ran about 20 weeks of dieting in total. So we did like, so when I joined, we did like a 1.5 year push, like pretty much 1.5 years bang on, just pure like bulk. Um, then we did like an 8 week mini cut, then another year push, and then we just did a 12 week diet, just like not that long ago. And now we're like firmly, like, I think like 12 weeks into the next push up, which again will probably be a year long. There seems to be a theme here that I'm doing very long push ups, and there's a reason for it because I just need a lot more muscle. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's where you kind of make the progress, isn't it? When you're kind of dieting, like that's just ultimately when you reveal the tissue. I think a lot of people they want to be lean, diet frequently, look good all the time, but like that's not where the progress is made, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And like if I was at the position when I started with AJ and say I only like pushed up like myself for like 3 or 4 months further than where I was and then wanted to diet for the summer, etc. Um, realistically, I wouldn't have made that much progress. And yes, like it's a bit challenging, especially the first time round, being like peak off season, like during the summer. It's obviously not the nicest if you want to go out and things like that. But ultimately, if you want to make a lot of progress to your physique, then it is needed. You are going to have to spend some summers where you are like, peak off season. You just are, um, and yes, it's going to get pretty hot and pretty sweaty within the gym. In years to come, you'll be thankful that you did, and I'm very grateful to obviously AJ, and also like thankful to myself that I stuck at it, because now I can like actually like understand the rewards of like just pushing for a long time, and it's definitely something I preach towards all of my clients. It's just like stick with it for as long as possible, really.
Definitely, same here. And I think something like about obviously you will look worse short term if you're going to dedicate yourself to a gaining phase. But what I find is like each time you kind of push yourself up, diet down again, you'll look better at the same level of body fat. So, like for example, you at peak gaining phase now will look much better at peak gaining phase for your first kind of push up because you've got more muscle tissue, you've got more shape to show for it. So ultimately, like if you kind of dedicate yourself to these push ups, you're going to look better than 99% of individuals that don't go to the gym anyway, and you're gonna have a lot more progress to show for it than just staying lean, aren't you?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And yeah, if you have like big long-term goals, like staying lean is just not going to get you there, like bottom line. Especially if you want to compete, do well, etc. Then you need to just like embrace the off season. You really do.
Definitely. And with gaining for kind of such a long period throughout those 3 years, what has helped you kind of maintain a sense of urgency? Like, what's helped you kind of stay on the ball and stay consistent? Because obviously that's a really long time, and obviously your goal, long term goal, is to compete, and you're still not kind of got that. You're still not there, if that makes sense. You've been gaining for that long, so how have you kind of maintained that sense of urgency and consistency throughout that period? Have you got any tips?
I mean, don't get me wrong, like there has been moments where I've thought, oh, this is getting repetitive. Like I just feel like I'm not really going anywhere because obviously, especially like peak off season, like you just look the same week to week, like things aren't
Yeah,
going in much of a direction. You are just sort of doing the do sort of thing. However, you kind of just have to like separate yourself from the look and really just focus like within the gym in terms of like logbook numbers, chasing down like progressions and things like that because at the end of the day, obviously you aren't gonna see constant changes within your physique at peak off season, and like especially if you're going to commit to a long term goal, you've just got to stick at it. That's literally it. You've just got to think of like the longer term picture, and just really focus on like gym performance, like chasing after logbooks, like progressions, etc. And really just focus on that, and then like keep on top of like appetite and things like that. And then eventually, like when you do diet down, like you'll see the rewards of that. I think my first diet, especially, um, did reveal like sort of the benefits, if that makes sense. And really like not like was like, yes, I've made loads of progress, because obviously I did, but it sort of gave me an insight that like actually this is working. Like I'm not where I want to be. I know if I keep doing this, I will get there. So that gave me like a bit of like hope, if that makes sense. To therefore take into future gaining phases that I know if I just stick at it, it will like come about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I found the same myself, and just with clients, like if they're doing their first push up, they're always like worried about how they're looking. They're holding body fat here, they're holding body fat there, and they're kind of a bit apprehensive about it during that push up. But then when they diet down again, they get kind of that reassurance, right? What they've done's worked. So then what I find with like clients is they're not kind of afraid to push their body weight up again because they know they can strip it off and they know it's going to be worth it at the end. Whereas first push up, you don't know that. You're just kind of sometimes like looking worse, although you're being maybe more consistent than you ever have, ticking all your boxes. I can appreciate it can be disheartening for some folk in that regard.
100%. Like my first push up, like I didn't look the best. Like I really didn't. I was like, a very like skinny, fat, like typical person when I started, especially. And like towards the end of like the push up, like I didn't look the best. My shape was just like a complete mess. Obviously, like a fair amount of body fat, etc. But I just knew I just had to stick at it. And obviously, then when I dieted down, it then revealed it all, sort of like the muscle that I had built. So it is just a case of like with your first push up, just sticking with it as much as possible and just really focusing on like your gym performance. And just know that in the long run, when you diet down next, it will be worth it. And you'll sort of reap the rewards of that long push up.
Definitely. And like throughout your gaining phases, have you had any kind of issues in regards to certain body parts not responding as well as you'd like and as well as others?
For sure, arms. Arms. They are absolutely the bane of my life right now. I'm still currently trying to bring them up right now. That's hence why I'm doing an arm day. Um, but yeah, to be fair, most things have come up like fairly evenly, I'd say. Um, the progress on my back in particular over the last push up has been like a lot more. Like it's probably the most it's come up ever. But that's probably just down to like just execution, intensity, just leveling up and things like that. But yeah, I'd say at the moment like arms are my weakness, probably delts as well, arms and delts. So at the moment, just giving them a bit more love, like just trying to increase the volume where possible, like making sure intensity, execution is like spot on as much as possible. Because like next time I diet down, I do not want small arms. So I'm everything in my power um, to like grow arms for it. So if you've got any arm tips for me, mate, I'll happily take them as well.
My arms aren't a strong point to myself either, to be honest. So I'm not got much tips there. But I'm kind of same with yourself with like my back. My back on the initial kind of gaining phase I done didn't really respond that well, and I think it is partly like knowledge and also learning how to kind of execute and connect with your back well because there's so much bits of tissue on the backside of your body and there's so much that can move load, and I think if you if like you don't have the knowledge it's for or it depends if it's a genetically good body part then it will grow fine, but if it's not then I think it takes time learning how to maybe do certain movements to bias different parts of your back and uh, using just obviously things like every other body part like a full range, making sure tempo's in a good spot as well as that, but just knowing how to execute it correctly I think's a big part of it.
100%, 100%, especially when it comes to back. Like, obviously, you can't technically see it, so people always struggle to like feel it and things like that, and like actually the muscle that they're using. So yeah, it does take time, and it obviously is a skill. But yeah, the main thing is just time, patience, and just like, executing things as best as possible.
And regarding your arms and delts, you said they were also a weakness for yourself. What have you said I think you said you played a bit with volume as well, to try and
Yes,
kind of rectify it and
yeah.
bring them up. So, what do you look for in terms of right? How do you know to do more volume? How do you know that's kind of the right thing to do? And what else have you maybe considered when kind of trying to bring them up?
So before increasing volume, what you've got to look at is execution. Are you executing things like to 100%? Because if you're not, then you're missing out on that, and you should focus on that first. But if you're like executing everything to like 100%, your intensity is absolutely spot on, like across the board, then you can look at increasing your volume across that like certain body part. Then what you've got to look at is like, okay, what am I going to be able to recover from by the next session? So, for example, for example, I have push every 5 days. So that's a fair amount of time in terms of between push sessions. So therefore, I can probably get away with an extra set of pressing. So I now do 3 sets of an overhead press rather than two that I was doing prior. However, if you were doing something like push like every 2 or 3 days, for example, like wherever your split was, I would perhaps look at something like a smaller body part, like for example your side delts, and look at an isolation exercise, because obviously they're a very small muscle group, so they can handle a lot more volume, like workload in total. So I would just whack on an extra set or two of like side lateral raises, because overall it's going to be less fatiguing compared to like a big overhead press. Especially if you're quite strong, it's going to be quite fatiguing. So, firstly, look at intensity and execution. Then, if those two are spot on, then look at increasing volume, depending on your split and your setup in terms of your recovery capabilities. Whether you increase like an isolation or you whether increase like a compound movement, for example. But for myself, I literally added a set of like overhead pressing. Took all my laterals up to like 3 sets, but they were pretty much at 3 sets anyway. And then arms is like a whole day as well, which I've worked into my split. So recovery is not too like impacted on that, but the main thing is focus on intensity and execution first. Then you can look to increase volume.
I think that's definitely the right route to go down because a lot of people, if they start with the latter, if they start by increasing volume, what ultimately I think ends up happening is the quality of their work is just diminished. And I think like what's going to build muscle is doing a lower overall amount of sets, but really really high quality, rather than the other end of the spectrum, in my opinion, because you're just not going to get those effective and stimulative reps, and then the overall amount of loading I think is just going to decrease really. So I think that's definitely the right route to go down.
Yeah, for sure. And you typically look at the people who do like 4 sets of 8 to 12, and chances are their intensity or execution is absolutely in the bin. And there's no wonder why they're not growing. It's because it's not because their volume's pretty high, obviously. It's actually their intensity and execution.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as a whole, like with clients, I think, and just seeing individuals in the gym, like when people don't make progress, like it's rarely because they've not got this certain movement for a certain muscle. It's not because they're not doing some magic exercise with a reverse band. It's like they're just not training hard enough. It's like I think a lot of problems can be
Nah, that's
solved in
literally it.
regards to training just by training ridiculously hard.
Yeah, pretty much bang on there.
And glad you agree there. And with your current training split, what are you currently running at the moment? So what does your like full training day or full kind of training split look like, or microcycle if you want to use the fancy word?
So at the minute it is push, pull, off, legs off. So obviously 2 rotations, but there's a arm day in once every 10 days. So it goes push, pull, off, push, pull, arms, legs off. So yeah, 2 rotations of basically push, pull, legs. And to be honest, that's the split that I've run for like the last probably 2 years, maybe a year and a half, basically throughout the last push up, and obviously the diet phase. And I think, like for me, like it's worked really, really well. Definitely seen the most growth over the last year, and like I very much enjoy it. That's the main thing as well. Like I go into sessions like fairly recovered. Yeah, enjoyment's like pretty high, so I'm not going to change it really anytime soon. I don't think.
Definitely, because obviously that's going to be a big driver of adherence. Not that adherence is probably something that's going to impact your consistency yourself, but you can't deny it's going to just impact your overall enjoyment for the process. And I think over like a gaining phase or a large space of time, if you're absolutely itching to step in the gym, I think your results are going to be better from that than like going in and doing something you're not going to enjoy and not really being in the mood to train at all.
100%. And obviously that goes back to the point of like the point that I made about like sticking out like long gaining phases, is that another tip that you may be able to do is like if you've been on the same training plan with the same movements and you are like really getting like a little bit bored of it, of the monotony, instead of just dieting, perhaps just like mixing up some of your training movements, or even your split, for example, that may just help push on for like another 4 or 5 months that can really show within your physique, rather than just dieting early, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Because it's like it's a balancing act. Like you want to obviously do what's going to be effective. You want to keep movements similar, logbook them, progress them over time. But like we just touched on, if you're hating your training, that's not going to yield kind of great results. So it's kind of balancing act between that and also making sure you're enjoying it. And if that's, I think swapping a movement now and then, I don't think that's gonna kind of harm your results in that much of a negative manner.
No, 100%. I completely agree. Completely agree.
So initially, when you kind of went to AJ, like what split were you on prior to the split you're running now, and why have you now transitioned to your current split?
So the first ever split I ran was, I believe, a 4 day split, 4 days a week, which was pull, push, off, upper, legs, off, off. And it basically just worked around my sort of like previous work schedule. And like the main focus was to bring up my upper body. My quads weren't too bad. I had zero hamstring, but mainly was that upper body that was lacking. So that was sort of the focus, and just sort of shifted around like sort of my current work schedule. And then it sort of then I sort of transitioned towards like the push pull sort of setup when I started training with Adam. And then we sort of transitioned into that split, and that's when also I sort of gave up my previous job and just went into like full time online coaching. So it also gave me a lot more time to be able to like train when I wanted, etc. Which is also probably another reason why I sort of went on to the push pull leg split. If I was still at that old job, chances are I probably would have still been on the same 4 day split. It probably would have changed over time. Obviously, I wouldn't have had as much free time that I do now to do like push pull off legs off. So yeah, sort of a combination of obviously starting to train with Adam, also like in my job and doing full time online coaching, sort of led me to be able to train a little bit more. So therefore, like, have a few extra sessions here and there.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think something big is making sure it fits your routine or schedule. Because, like, if you've got, like you said, your split's kind of on a 10-day rotation. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think like if someone's maybe they've got like set work days and it's really not feasible for them to train certain days. I think that's where maybe having like a 7-day split is like really valuable for some individuals. So it actually works for their routine and their kind of lifestyle. And because ultimately, like if you're cramming a session in, but it's yielding maybe poor sleep, poor recovery, and a lot of stress, and I think that split's never going to be optimal for that individual, and they're better doing something maybe a lower frequency or maybe a training setup that on paper doesn't look perfect but works for their schedule and their kind of their week.
Yeah, 100%. Like when I was training, like on the 4 day split, two of those sessions were on my days off, and then the sessions I'd have to train like after work. Sometimes I wouldn't get back till like 9, half 9 at night. So obviously it did have an impact on like sleep, like meal timings, things like that. That's why the majority of my, well, half the sessions were predominantly on my days off, so that it didn't impact other areas, and that's probably why I only had like 4 days sort of training at the start. Not because it's the most optimal, but mainly because it fitted my routine and sort of didn't impact sort of any other variables, like you said, like sleep and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. Like it's obviously not ideal. Like having to kind of rush home and go immediately to sleep. You're just not going to get the same sleep quality, especially if you're trying to eat post workout, etc. So it's good to kind of have your day set up where you have plenty of time. And in regards to training with Adam, like how did you kind of meet, and how pivotal do you think he's he's been in your training, like training with someone? Because obviously he's got he's got quite a lot of obviously experience training, and he's done very well last year. I believe not last year prior competing. How's he influenced your training?
Yeah, quite a lot. So in terms of like sort of how we sort of get started with that, basically I moved to the coach. If you've not heard of it, gym in Cambridge, not a bad gym. And then I'd been there about a week, so I'd already sent AJ like all the equipment, etc., for him to program me sessions, etc. Um, and then, like about a week later, Adam joined the coach, and I had no idea who Adam was. Like he was just a regular person to me. I had no idea. And yeah, so he joined like a week after me, and I remember him talking to the owner, asking the owner if there's been any more kit added since I joined, because obviously AJ already had this sort of sort of like program list anyway for all the kit in there. And he was like, no, there's not been able to do anything. And I was in the gym at that point, and then that's when the owner introduced me to Adam because he was talking about me or something. So I was like, oh, you're right. And then yeah, we got chatting, just like, oh, you're right. Oh, you're coached by AJ. Yeah, me too. And that was about it really. And then we'd see at this point, I was still working my other job, so I was still doing the 4 day a week split. And then we were just like every now and then we'd see each other and we'd be like, oh yeah, we need to get a session in, we need to get a session in, classic bro, need to get a session in kind of thing. And then the new year came around and I'd quit my job. And we'd had a few sessions together at this point. And then basically I'd quit my job and I said to him like, do you want to train together all the time? I hadn't had a full time training partner before, and he was. I think he was just like training solo, so he was happy to like train together. So that was pretty much how we started. I was just like, "You want to train?" And he was like, "Yeah." So I had all the time in the world to sort of train whenever, which works for me. But yeah, we just started training, and obviously he started prep like a few months after that. So obviously, I pretty much trained every single session with him throughout prep, and it was a big eye opener for sure. Like definitely one leveled up my training intensity for sure. Simply because like we used to just fucking send it and just like force reps on everything. And it was great fun. Like it was absolutely great. But definitely like took my intensity up to a whole new level for sure. Um, and then in terms of just like an eye opener, like massive eye opener, especially seeing him prep and seeing like firsthand what he goes for, not only for like my own coaching knowledge and coaching eye, but also just to see day to day like how he is and how he reacts to different situations, etc. Like just gave me a massive insight in terms of how it's going to be like when I compete. Obviously, like I'm still like a few years away yet from competing. Obviously, you've already done it once and you're doing it again next year. I'm not even close yet, So obviously that gave me like a big understanding in terms of what it's actually like to compete, etc., and how you sort of are day to day. So yeah, just a general like big eye opener, a big level up in terms of intensity and things like that. But yeah, it was great to be honest. And today we still train together today here and there. We have like a few sessions like within the rotation together. Some of our sessions are a bit different now because obviously different like weak points and things like that. But yeah, no, it was great. It was great.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. That's the thing about kind of training with someone like bodybuilding's in a way a very selfish sport, and you obviously want to make sure you're maximizing your progress and doing what's needed to get the most out of your training. And if someone's got, let's say, a different needs than yourself, it's kind of hard to both kind of train together on a consistent basis, isn't it? Unless you obviously have the same weak body parts and strong body parts, but that is quite rare, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Like obviously when Adam was prepping, etc., I was just like, yeah, I'll come and do your sessions. Like it's fine, and we had pretty much the same sessions. And then
Yeah.
obviously as we've like transitioned both into like off season, like I need more arms. He does not need any more arms. He could give some arms to me and still
Yeah, I
have
know.
plenty. So a lot more amount for me needed. So yeah, literally just like different body parts need to come up, etc. But we do have a few sessions that we do together, like legs and things like that. So it is still nice. But yeah, like at the end of the day, you do have to focus on yourself. Like obviously, Adam needs to focus on his weak body parts, and I need to focus on mine. Because at the end of the day, like it's you're on your own out there. Like it's not like a you're in a team sport. But it is nice to have someone to train with for sure. But I don't mind training on my own or like with someone. I'm not too bothered really.
Yeah.
What about yourself? Have you ever had like a long term like training partner?
Not really. So the gym I train at, like I've got a few kind of what I'd class as close mates who train like at similar times. So I'm never kind of training kind of with them at the same session, but like they come in round about similar time and like we'll just kind of go and spot each other on certain movements, etc. And our training setup's pretty similar. Like for example, one of my clients, Graham, like I'm on a push pull legs, then push back and hamstrings. He does push pull legs, upper lower. So like we're in doing the kind of a similar body part half the time anyway, so we can get a spot off each other, that sort of thing. So it works out pretty well in that regard, but we've still got our split orientated around each other's needs, and we're not kind of doing something that's maybe not going to be conducive towards our goals, if that makes sense. So we've got our own setup, but
Yeah.
it kind of works quite well in that regard.
Yeah, that's quite nice because then you've got your own stuff, but you can still rely on someone to like get a spot and things like that, and it'd be like a decent spot, you know.
Yeah, definitely. So, bit of a segue. Like, we're gonna, if it's all right with you, touch on things a bit nutrition related. Find out about like what your current diet's like. So, do you want to outline kind of what
Yeah.
your are you on a meal plan or do you have a macro approach at the moment?
So it is pretty much a meal plan. I eat pretty much the same thing every day. But if there's something different, I'll like work it in. I'm not too strict on it. I tend to eat pretty much the same thing every day.
And why do you go for like a meal plan approach? Why do you think that's kind of appropriate for your goals instead of maybe if it fits your macros?
Personally, like I think there's nothing wrong with if it fits your macros. Like if that works for you, it works for you. It's not a problem. I just think for me, especially with the amount of food that I have to eat, like in the off season, like I have a very adaptive metabolism, so my food gets very high in the off season and also very low within like a dieting phase. Like it went from like 5,300 calories peak off season, like 850 carb to like sub 2,000 in the diet, which is just wild. So yeah, obviously in like off season, much prefer just having like a meal plan, just eating the same thing every day. Because what I found prior to having a coach and like getting with AJ is the biggest thing I struggled with was sticking to nutrition, like actually getting the food in, and that's why I was always skinny because I'd never eat enough. So I found that stressing about like getting enough food in every single day, like tracking my food and then getting to like 8 o'clock at night and I've got 2,000 calories left, that would just stress me the hell out. So I just think having like a set sort of meal plan that I can just follow. If I just eat this amount of food every single day, I'll know I'm going to grow. So if I just stick to that, it's just a lot easier rather than stressing about it. Because especially when you have to eat a lot of food, the last thing you want to do is like get to the evening and you've got like half your calories worth. So for me, I've always just found that eating like a meal plan type like meals is a lot better for me, simply because of just like being able to get the food in, etc. But I will say like for our off season, like I'm like not as strict as I am in obviously a diet. Like if I want to swap a meal out, so for example, if I want to have like rice instead of pasta, I will. You know, things like that. I'm not too strict upon. It's just mainly getting in the meals really.
Definitely, there's no point kind of losing sleep over it. As long as it's kind of digesting well, and if you kind of have that
No,
flexibility when you're gaining, you're gonna be kind of like nice and fresh mentally to go into a dieting phase and be able to kind of stick to it consistently, aren't you?
100%, 100%. What about yourself? Are you on a meal plan right now, or do you prefer the like macros approach, or does that change like during like an off season or prep sort of scenario? Because I imagine you'd be on a meal plan like during prep.
Yeah. Although I believe I transitioned from like a macro approach to if it to like a meal plan. I believe it was my pre-prep diet, the last one I done, so not that pre-prep diet there before my first prep. And like before before that, like I just basically made my own meal plan. So AJ obviously gave me macronutrients to kind of have, and then I just constructed that into a meal plan myself. So then when it came to like pre-prep, I knew prep was coming up, so I just wanted to kind of take that stress away and get him to do it for me because at least it's kind of less work for me to do on my end, and I know if he's kind of constructed a meal plan, then I'm nailing everything to the best of my ability. I've got kind of the best setup with my nutrition possible. And like as you were saying, like I think it's a lot more convenient. I don't even have to think about it. I just make my meals, eat it, and I'm fine. And then obviously when you're in a gaining phase, pushing food up, you can obviously, if you're having different food choices all the time, it can potentially make it a bit hard to know if it's definitely gonna be appropriate in regards to your hunger levels, etc. Like if you choose maybe a food source and then it turns out that you're like stuffed off it or you're struggling to get the food in, that has a knock-on effect on your next meal. I just rather have something where I definitely know I'm going to be able to kind of have that food and it's going to sit well and I can just repeat that and not have to kind of think about or have time out of my day to kind of prepare that food.
For sure, completely understand.
Yeah. With clients as well, I recommend like obviously if it fits your macros can work as well as a meal plan. I think what's maybe best is somewhere in the middle for some individuals, like general population, because if let's say if it fits your macros, it's a bit of a pain in the arse like being on MyFitnessPal every single meal. Whereas if you've got maybe a blend of both, some meals are similar or the same, you've got routine with it, It means you're not having to track every single meal from scratch and just wing every single day, hitting your calories and macros.
Yeah, exactly. Like it is a lot less stressful, like going on MyFitnessPal every single day, like working out. And chances are, after a while, you're probably going to eat the same things anyway. Like there's the amount of clients that I've had that are like, I'll say to them at the start, like, oh, do you want a meal plan? Do you want to just track your own macros? Like, how do you want to go about it? And they're like, no, I'm happy to track my own macros. Like I quite like tracking it, etc. I'm like, cool, that's fine, not a problem. And then if like a few months in, they're just like, actually, I eat the same thing every day. Do I need to input this? And I'll just be like, right, let's create a meal plan, what you normally eat, and then you can just stick to that and let me know if you change it, etc. And normally that's how it goes, because people often find that like just eating the same thing is actually a lot easier than like just stressing
Yeah.
about it. So
And I think clients that have that structure, in my opinion, get kind of the best results, or at least having like some structure in that, and they're not just sporadic with their nutrition. So you
yeah,
you
for sure,
also
for sure.
touched
Just because it's a lot more consistent across like all bases.
definitely. You touched on your kind of calorie intake being, was it upwards of 5,000 and then below 2,000 during your diet? Was that right?
Yeah, yeah.
So how does your food sources and food choices kind of change when it comes to being in a gaining phase and then being in a dieting phase to manage that super high and super low calorie intake?
So in off season, mainly like sources will come from like things like bagels, rice, pasta, potatoes. Mainly things like in off season, things that digest really, really well. Chances are in a dieting phase when you're dieting, most things are going to digest well anyway, because you're on lower food anyway. So your body's just going to like uptake anything that you put in, especially if you get super low anyway. But yeah, when it comes to off season and pushing up food, digest really, really well. That's number one. Two, also something that you enjoy. There's nothing worse than like eating 5,000 calories worth of something that you really, really just don't enjoy. Um, so, main thing is digest well, and secondly, something that you enjoy. So for me, like when I get up to like 850 carb, I am gonna have things like squares bars, things like jam, things like Pop Tarts. If you've seen my stories, you know I'm a big fan of like frozen Pop Tarts. They're the absolute goat. So in off season, I will have things like that. But then when it comes to dieting, like as soon as I shift into that diet mode, all of those things are taken out. So it will literally be mostly like whole sources, and things like rice, things like potato, things like that. But main thing is just like whole foods, and then like as it gets to like peak off season, like other things will be introduced. As long as they digest well, it's all good. Like orange juice as well, absolute hack for the off season. But again, when it comes to dieting, that's completely gone. And also when I'm like dieting, like I will pick sources that are just a lot more bang for your buck, if that makes sense. Like I won't just have like a squares, but I'd much rather have like a bigger portion of rice because ultimately it's going to fill me up, and also it's better for you, you know. So yeah, obviously it does shift like between like dieting and obviously off season. But main thing is that you enjoy it and like it digests well. That's the big thing.
Definitely. And I like what you're saying regarding like removing those food choices when it comes to a diet. I think that's where a lot of people struggle is like they might want to maybe have some squares bars in there or foods that are, would you say, a bit more tasty than maybe plain foods, but it's enjoyable in the moment, but then you're just left hungry, your food focus is higher, and it's just harder to kind of stick to your diet as a whole, I think.
100%, 100%. And like the people that do like really cling on to like those sort of things within their dieting phase often, like you say, do have troubles with their food focus and things like that, and their appetite is like super high. Whereas someone who like just sticks to like whole foods, etc., chances are their appetite's going to be like a lot like managed a lot better, and their food focus is going to be lower. But obviously everyone's different, but that's like just a general like rule of thumb, really.
Definitely. And what's your go-to flavour of bagel then now? Have you got in your diet?
Flavor of bagel. Oh,
Yeah,
to be honest, I'm quite a boring man. To be honest, when it comes to bagel, it's literally just the
really.
plain Warburton. Has to be Warburton. Has to be Warburton. What about yourself? Give me yours.
I shop at Aldi and they don't even do the cinnamon raisins, so I just get usually the plain ones or the sesame seed ones. Have you tried the cookies and cream bagels? Can you hear me okay?
I have tried them. Hello, hello.
Yeah, I've got you. Sorry. There was just a bit of delay.
Ah,
You've tried them.
okay, cool. No worries.
I was quite disappointed to be honest.
What's that? Sorry.
I was quite disappointed in them. They're
about
like
about
bloody
the plain
cardboard, the
bagels.
cookies and cream bagels. Yeah, but I'd say my go-to is cinnamon and raisin. That's my favourite anyway.
Oh, really? That is a shame.
And
That is a
what about
shame.
like off-plan meals? How can you hear me okay? You good?
So in terms of like off-plan meals, like throughout the off season, it will probably be just like one a week. Nothing like too major. If I've got things on, I'll push it to two. But when it comes to dieting, like I won't have like hello, hello, yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, good. I got everything regarding off-plan meals, sorry.
It's all good. Can you hear me all right? Yeah, you got me, yeah.
Yeah, so you were saying regarding off-plan meals, one times a week, sometimes two, is that right?
Yeah, so in off season, like once a week, sometimes two, depending on if I've got like family things on, etc. So yeah, that's in off season, like once a week, absolutely fine. Like that's the time where you should enjoy food and enjoy like social occasions, etc. Because obviously when it comes like you know yourself, like in a prep, off-plan meals are not a thing for like months and months and months. Like I'm sure like you didn't go for a long time without having like something like a pizza or something like that, I'm sure. But yeah, when it comes to dieting, typically I won't have any off-plan meals. Like even in my recent mini cut, I think I may have had like one. Again, that was tracked. Simply because I just had like an event on, but apart from that, like I wouldn't have had like any off-plan meals. So yeah, dieting phase, I typically personally don't have any. But then when it comes to off season, once a week, at least if that. Again, like it's good to just enjoy different foods, etc. However, like with clients, like some like lifestyle clients that I do have, I have like implemented like one a week, regardless if they're like dieting or not, just because of their enjoyment factor and their goals. But for me specifically in my goals, like when it comes to dieting, no off-plan meals whatsoever. Simply because just to get into that routine, really. Because when I know when it comes around to prep, there's not going to be any off-plan meals whatsoever. It's just going to be more rice, really. As I'm sure you're all aware of, no off-plan meals for like 6 months.
Yeah, I think the only thing off-plan I had during prep was, and well, it wasn't off-plan because we kind of discussed and arranged it, so it was technically on plan. Was a Nando's after one of my shows, but then again, like I fit that into my macros for my last meal, so it wasn't really I wasn't like going all out or crazy or that. But I agree regarding kind of having your off-plan meals in when you're in a gaining phase. And I think something to obviously be mindful of is enjoying them, having that mental break, but obviously not skewing digestion because that's obviously a big consideration. If you're having like 5,000 upwards calories a day, you can't have much room for error when it comes to your food sources. I believe. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%, 100%. That's one of the biggest things that I'm sort of speaking to a few of my clients about at the moment is that they're getting towards like the upper end of their like off season and they're having off plan meals and they're like the next day their digestion's like ruined and therefore it just affects the next couple of days of like eating and things like that. So for sure, like I'm very like not particular, like I would chances are I'll have similar things like every time I have an off-plan meal, simply because it just digests well, especially like peak end of the off season. Like I don't want anything to like disrupt my digestive system, especially when appetite's low as well. You want to obviously keep that in check as much as possible. So yeah, 100% a massive, massive important factor for when like deciding like off-plan meals.
Yeah, and sometimes like when you're in that spot peak gaining phase, like your food focus is just so low, like you don't even kind of care about them, and you just kind of want to eat your diet. Sometimes I find.
100%, 100%. Definitely have gone through weeks where I just don't really fancy anything and I just want to eat rice, just because it's easy, just get it down sort of thing.
Yeah, and what would you typically have for an off-plan meal? What's your go-to?
Or go to now it depends. It depends if I'm with the missus or not because she is a big Chinese fan, and I don't mind Chinese. Chinese is okay. I would typically like most of the time opt for like either a Domino's, a burger, or like fish and chips. They're like the top three. Top three.
Fish and
Domino's,
chips.
Domino's.
Yeah, you don't even get brown sauce on it down there, do you? In England.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. No
See
chance.
that's a staple up here.
Nah, no chance. Bear with me 1 second.
No problem.
Sorry about that. I'm back.
No, you're all good. I can just can crop that out anyway as well as the lags as well. So few
Okay,
listener
no
questions
worries.
before we go. that all good? Can you hear me okay?
Hello? I think you cut out on that
Yep.
last bit.
You.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So a few listener questions. So first of all, someone's asked, how would you kind of go about maximizing
Okay, yeah.
hamstring development if that's kind of a weak body part in your physique?
How would I what, sorry, on my physique? I didn't catch that last bit.
How how would you go about bringing up hamstrings if they're a weakness on your physique? How would you maximize the development of them?
Oh, okay. So, in terms of hamstrings, so firstly, again, intensity, execution, look at those two, um, like within like your leg sessions, because chances are you're not taking them all the way to failure. Um, Secondly, place a ham curl towards the start of your session. So I always start a leg session with like leg extensions and seated hamstring curl. I always do them prior to like a big compound, just because I can get the most out of them. So potentially shifting your like isolation work prior to your compound work. Then you can look at sort of increasing volume. Sort of across the week. So I have a set of hamstring curl on pull at the moment because obviously I need to bring up my hamstrings a little bit more. So I have one set on pull, and then the usual volume on like legs, etc. You can also look at running your hinge as a like hamstring dominant. So picking things like an RDL or even like a strict stiff leg over like a conventional deadlift. Again, that's just going to carry over into like hamstring development and glute development as well. But main thing is like intensity. That's like biggest thing across most people's training is just like intensity and like shifting it towards like the start of your session, just so the quality of work is a lot higher.
I definitely agree. And you don't like get into your compounds when it comes to legs and think I'm absolutely trash because I've done those hamstring curls prior. They don't really have much negative effect in terms of your performance, and you don't feel that kind of fatigue from them, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly that.
And next question is, how do you know when you should kind of perform a dieting phase? Like when would be the right time to diet? Let's say someone's, I believe their context is they're maybe in a gaining phase, pushing their body weight up. They're wanting to kind of know when to diet back down.
Hello.
Did, did you get that about the dieting phase or?
I think it just lagged out. It lagged a little bit towards the end.
Sorry, mate. So it's how or where when would you kind of put in a dieting phase for like a client, and how do you know when maybe the right time a dieting phase would be for an individual?
Okay, perfect. So in terms of like when to do an actual diet, there's a few like factors that you can sort of look for. One, and probably the most common one, is appetite is in the bin. Like if you cannot eat the food, you're probably not going to grow. So biggest sign to look out for is like just absolute loss of appetite. Again, similarly to that, digestion. Digestion is in the bin. There's another key point in terms of looking when the right time is to mini cut. Obviously, like if you've gained too much body fat, again, however, that's like kind of individual to each person in terms of like their body fat levels and like how far they've pushed. But if you've been pushing for a substantial amount of time, like 6, 8, 9 months plus, and like you've put on a fair amount of like weight overall, and you've worked your calories up, you've gotten stronger. Like, and if you're starting to see these signs of appetite's in the bin, digestion's in the bin. You're just generally not feeling the best, like you're feeling a bit sluggish. Sleep quality isn't the best. Just generally feeling a bit meh within yourself. Just day to day and like day to day activities, then that could be a sign that you sort of need to run like a mini cut. But yeah, look at mainly those few things prior to sort of like planning out a mini cut. But the main thing is just like appetite, digestion, just general like feeling within yourself, like are you feeling like sluggish, things like that, productivity, and just generally feeling a bit like fucked, basically.
Yeah, just looking out for those red flags.
Yeah, for sure.
And someone's also asked, what training split do you recommend? Obviously, there's not much context behind this, so let's say that this person's, I think, relatively new to training, and let's say they've not got any kind of time limitations or days they can't train. What split would you generally? I know it's not like a one size fits all approach, but for this question answer, what would you kind of program someone in regards to maybe a split if they're just getting into the gym?
So you kind of, in terms of like, obviously it's a little bit of a vague question, but if they're just starting out, and like say they've been to like the gym for a little bit, but like not really, like they just want to take it a bit more seriously, I would probably opt for either an upper lower split or something like a push pull legs and then an upper lower. Basically, something that you're training at least everything twice a week. That was something that's like bottom line should be done, is like training everything at least twice a week, and then secondly just working around sort of like your routine, like your work schedule, things like that. But obviously you said like this person doesn't really have one, so yeah, try and hit everything twice a week. Allow yourself to work around your schedule, your routine, etc. And thirdly, make sure you incorporate rest days as well, because rest days are really, really important. I have people that come to me and they're just like, "Yeah, I want to train every day." And I'm like, "No, you're not. You're not training every day. You don't need to." So yeah, I would either opt for like upper lower, because it's a very, very good split for someone who's like beginner. Full body is another one. Again, like people often get sort of like they're not as a fan of upper body as like um, no, sorry, full body rather than like upper lower. So I would always like opt for like upper lower or like a push pull legs and then an upper lower sort of within that week. So to ensure everything is hit twice a week.
I definitely agree, and I think when you're starting out, you don't need to kind of have a day designated for chest. Like you don't need that amount of volume to kind of grow a body part. And with like having a full body split, that's something I've obviously considered for clients. But I think on paper it sounds good, it sounds effective, but I don't think most people, like you said, enjoy it. One and two, I don't think people train hard enough to warrant progressing on that split. Sadly, although on paper it would be a good split for someone to kind of start out of.
Yeah, 100%. Like that's the thing with the full body split is like you have to be able to train hard. And I ran it for about 6, 7 months, I think, post lockdown. And it did get pretty hard towards the end, but if you don't know how to like train hard and like train properly, you're not going to get the most out of it. So it's a lot easier to sort of focus on like upper lower or like a combination of upper lower and push pull legs. And also like you said, it's chances are they're going to enjoy it a bit more as well because upper lower, I'm sorry, full body is quite an intense split. Going to do like
Yeah,
a hack squat and then going over to do like a dumbbell press or something like that.
yeah, definitely, I'd agree with you there. And I think you don't really get much of a pump from doing kind of full body, do you? Oh, you might, but it's not as kind of good as doing like a direct pull day or a push day or that. And I think that's something that does impact people's enjoyment.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, getting that pump and just like allowing people to enjoy it, especially when they're starting out, that is a big factor. Because like otherwise they're just not going to stick at it long term. So enjoyment is like high priority within that list.
Definitely. So thank you very much for coming on, mate. I really appreciate it. Is there anything you want to kind of touch on, or any topics, or anything you'd like to discuss before we go, or think?
No, I think we've covered a good few topics there. To be fair, there should be some good information for the listeners. But no, thank you for having me on, mate. It's an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate it.
No problem, mate. Pleasure is mine. Would you like to tell everyone where they can find you, and like your social media platforms, etc.?
Yeah, so main one is Instagram. It's just Charlie underscore Everall. If you listen to this in the future, maybe there'll be YouTube. Who never knows? Maybe next year. So if you listen in the future, then maybe. But yeah, main thing is on Instagram, like Charlie underscore Everall. You can find me on there for sort of all sort of social media and like content and coaching and things like that.
Perfect. And I'll make sure I'll link your Instagram in description, so everyone do check Charlie out and drop him a follow.
Appreciate it.
No problem. Well, yeah, thank you very much for coming on, and thank you very much for listening.